Alrighty. Hello everybody, it's your boss, Joe Boss, and welcome to another trading stream. We got a couple of things to cover today regarding some news we got here with Iran. How is everybody doing today? Gonna get something set up on the side monitor over here. Alrighty. Alright, let's go straight into the... There we go. So, what we got... If I could turn the music down just a tad. There we go. Trump calls for a pause on all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of an ongoing meeting and discussions. The ongoing meetings and discussions. So this is when the White House made a post on it on X, but this is when the news fell through on oil. So when the news hit, oil fell 10% in 15 minutes. That was a huge ass move. That was a big move. So, are traders going to be fading this move? Is what we're going to try and figure out today. My answer is going to be yes. A lot of traders are going to be fading this. And let's go over why maybe. So first off, Trump is not likely talking to the Iranian extremists here. So if I open a new tab here and go to a couple of these notes. Trump is likely not talking to Iranian conservatives, the religious extremists, and instead talking to moderates. That increases odds the conservatives and moderates in Iran fight themselves, frankly, as they have conflicting goals. One wants to appease the United States, one wants to fight to the death. The ones that want to fight to the death will maybe try and coerce the ones that want to make a deal. So until the extremists are removed, I think the attacks from Iran will likely continue at the Strait of Hormuz, blocking it, keeping it effectively closed. And that will keep pressure on commodities, especially oil here that we can see on the chart, to eventually recover here. And we can listen to what Trump has to say here.
Who is Steve Witkoff speaking with, Mr. President?
A top person. Don't forget, we've wiped out the leadership phase 1, phase 2, and largely phase 3. But we're dealing with the man who I believe is the most respected and the leader. It's a little tough. We've wiped out everybody.
Is that the Supreme Leader?
No, not the Supreme Leader. We don't. Well, nobody heard of the second Supreme Leader, the Son.
Are these direct?
Nobody. We have not heard from the Son. Every once in a while, you'll see a statement made, but we haven't. We don't know if he's living. But the people that seem to be running it,
no proof of life.
They seem that based on really fact, because things they've said have taken place.
Mr. President.
Okay. Now, those moderates would be the, quote, representatives mentioned over here. So the moderates that Trump is speaking of here, that he's in communication with. CNBC host Joe Kernan said U.S. President Donald Trump described ongoing contacts with Iran as effectively amounting to, quote, regime change, according to the remarks on air. Kernan said Trump told him the talks were not with a single leader, but with, quote, representatives, adding Iran presents itself as having a broader structure. he said Trump, quote, went on to say or insist that this is regime change because it's totally different people that were involved. Okay. And then back over here, and we have a rumored name to go with the moderates. The leader of the moderates, the leader of this representative group, is the Iranian parliament speaker, Mohammad Kalibaf. At least that's how you say it. Kalibaf is reported to be the one negotiating with the United States that Trump is talking about here, who's the quote-unquote real leader, right? So we'll see if he ends up becoming the head of a transitory government in maybe some future announcements. And then, the U.S. and Israel will likely continue to bomb Iran. But for the next 5 days, according to this post here that's on the chart, the U.S. won't bomb Iranian power plants. So people who are expecting, who took this news and over-extrapolated the pause on all military strikes without reading the next half of the sentence against Iranian power plants are over-extrapolating their expectations, to put it nicely. Hello, Ani. Nice to see you in the chat. Nice to see you. We had a good talk. Nice hangout today. Very, very nice hangout today in the Discord chat. Very, very nice. So, the moderates are mentioned, and the Iranian parliament speaker is speculated to be the one negotiating with Trump currently. So, this leads into something I brought up at the very beginning of this operation as a potential risk, which was either civil war or balkanization risks. So, I mentioned balkanization risks before right here. If there are groups in Kurdistan and Khuzestan that start military operations against the Islamic Republic, then Iran could end up balkanized if a transitory government isn't established. And you can see everyone is focused on Tehran. The real story may be on Iran's borders. And you can see all these different ethnic groups are around Iran. And this is what they could be mentioning by representatives are coming forward and trying to talk to Trump, right? So different groups here from these different regions of Iran are very likely, I think, coming forward and trying to make a deal for Iran. And then some of the more Ayatollah-aligned groups here are not, right? Also, at the start of the war, I pointed out some civil war risks here. Quote, a civil war on some scale, large or small, is still up in the air. As the new government is created is what I expect. The secondary targets are all the Western countries, right? A major concern about the transition is about violence and terrorism from those grieving and mad about the Ayatollah's assassination. I think their primary targets will be Iranians on the side of a transitory government. A civil war on some scale, large or small, is still up in the air. And I think the odds of this scenario here described on the 3rd of March when I posted this is becoming a bit more likely. And then we have here, original post after the start of the war. I believe this might go to the same exact post. Yep, same exact post. All right, so now we're going to get into the trade plans. The trade plans. Okay, we got a couple of updates on some trades, at least that I took. So this is crude and the reaction of crude. And the relationship between crude and these trades is going to be incredibly obvious. Crude prices go down, Brent prices go down, Euro prices go down. It's going to help assist equity prices, some currencies. It's going to help a few other commodities that are dependent on oil products, oil refined products. And it's going to help out with sentiment for inflation expectations. So if we go to, let's say, euro dollar as kind of one of the big ones currency wise, you can see we had a trade right here. It was doing nice and swell. It was up 75 pips, and then we had the message come out from Trump. We had the announcement come out from Trump, and that stopped out that trade like that. So if we now go to, let's say, a 2-hour chart here, so we can kind of zoom out a bit. So now we went ahead, hopped back in, and we are kind of in a holding spot right now. I still expect continued downside, but you know, with the increased volatility, you also have to increase your stop size, even if your position size has to be reduced to accommodate for that stop size. It's never fun when these sorts of things happen, especially if they end up reversing back in your favor later. So yeah, they're stopped out, was re-entered. After realizing there were now 2 factions vying for control in Iran, and that the Strait of Hormuz is very likely still going to be closed, and that it was the moderates talking to Trump, the conservatives in Iran are very likely going to be fighting to the death. And I don't even necessarily know if conservatives is the correct term for these groups. But when I say conservatives in Iran, I'm talking about the religious extremists and fundamentalists, those who are Islamic Republic aligned. So now we can go to New Zealand dollar. Price returned to this original entry. So it's actually not so bad, but you know what? It also does kind of suck when the trade is, 110 pips in your favor and zips right back up within a 4-hour period, right back to your entry. Kind of sucks, but you know what? All things considered, we set expectations last week to rise going into the RBNZ governor's speech today, which actually just concluded. And then our following expectation is to see continued downside. So even though we were correct on setting this expectation so far, because we've had this up move, we haven't seen this following down move yet. So far, our expectation has been met here. And for the kind of the wrong reasons, right? We were expecting a jump here based off more hawkish RBNZ speeches, but we got this jump based off of oil moves from Trump's announcement. So what did the RBNZ governor say? Because now we do have that information. She said, quote, "A short-lived disruption and a temporary increase in petrol prices can and should be looked through from a monetary policy perspective." So when they're saying we're going to look through inflation, it means they're going to try and not do any monetary policy action. They're not going to try and do any hikes. However, the odds of rate hikes is increasing for the RBNZ, and not just them either. And that the RBNZ would, quote, would need tighter monetary policy to ensure inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. So inflation expectations are going to be the primary indicator to determine monetary policy tightening, and inflation expectations, while they are going to be a big signal there, I think it's also worth noting that it'll be, there's a lot of variable rate bonds and mortgages in New Zealand. So if yields in New Zealand rise and rise and rise rapidly, that can eat at consumer expectations as well. And that could ultimately hurt growth, spending growth in New Zealand too. Wouldn't be so great on that front. So we have one more quote here. The focus is specifically on medium-term inflation expectations, right? So let's do this quote. If there are effects on medium-term inflation, this is what the RBNZ governor is saying. If there are effects on medium-term inflation or inflation expectations, the appropriate policy response could be to increase interest rates to prevent these second-round effects. So I think that the analysis from the prior point is on point, and overall, these expectations are so far so good. However, if there are calls for rate hikes, if they're hiking into slower growth and higher inflation, while that certainly can help with the value of the currency, hiking usually is done kind of after the fact. So when a quote-unquote crash comes, the hikes come after the crash. So if we are expecting this more hawkish monetary policy out of many central banks, not just the RBNZ, to react this way, then generally speaking, we actually need to see the bad economic data come through. And when that bad economic data actually realizes, then there's going to be hits on all these assets, and typically it'll be quite favorable for the dollar in those scenarios. And then it's after those scenarios realize, at the following central bank rate decision meetings for all these different central banks, that you typically get the rate hikes that then generate some kind of recovery in the currency, at least. Now, on to the next one, Aussie dollar. Man, we went through all the geopolitical stuff so quickly this stream. So many streams. It's like, hey, here's 2 hours of geopolitical commentary, right? Here's all this stuff. Now it's just like back-to-back charts, right? Back-to-back charts right now. It's very nice being able to go right into the charts. Well, right now we have a new short here on Aussie dollar in response to this hike. And so far it's doing so well. You know, those Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar trades here are definitely holding up better than those Euro USD trades. That's for certain. Euro USD. Yeah, so you can see the drawing right here. It's in a bit of a drawdown. What is it? 10 pips drawdown, 15 pips drawdown. It definitely was worse at some point, right? That was 34. So it's doing okay. Still definitely could be a loser, but compared to these other positions, which is why it's important to have a nice portfolio diversification. So then if, let's say, you have a trade idea for general appreciation of the US dollar, but then you get some specific, very positive shock in just one currency, you're not out if you bet the house on just that one currency. Being able to split up your shots across a bunch of different pairs also helps you in situations where it's a lot harder to sometimes predict what is going to be the best gainer or the worst loser in scenarios where you simply can't put all your focus everywhere all at once. Or a good analogy for it is don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And then if we go back to, I think it was, no, we were looking at Aussie dollars, so we can go back over here to this chart. But yeah, the Aussie and New Zealand dollar trades are doing just fine, and they're up like 20 some odd pips or whatever. So Aussie here entered this trade to fade Trump's announcement. Fuel issues are likely to compound economic issues, and the same can definitely be said for New Zealand. The RBNZ governor explicitly pointed fuel shortages as a major risk. Now, we're only 20 minutes into the stream, and I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover. So what I could do is I could bring up the research form, and I could do a couple other things. So if I zoom in here real quick, and let's just full screen this real quick. So here's the research form that we got. I was just actually posting some stuff to the French municipal elections thread because we got a few things news related over there. And you can see all these research threads above my head, all these research threads of all the things that we're covering. Actually, if you go into the general chat right now in the Discord, you'll actually see this list of threads that are currently kind of worth watching. We put SAW in here as well. Aussie fuel shortage. We were just talking about New Zealand and Aussie right now having fuel shortage issues, and man, it is bad. We brought this up in quite a few streams recently. Not a whole lot of terribly new information here, but man, it's getting pretty bad. A lot of people are having a hard time actually now being able to afford the gas to get to work, and a lot of people are being told, hey, work from home, or only, like for example, some schools are saying, hey, you know, we're only going to have school a couple of times a week now. We're also getting other fuel shortage commentary done here in the 2026 Iran commodities crisis thread. And you can see we have what's going on with shipping here. We have Ravensbrück's interview there. Very good stuff. Good commentary on there. Let's see here. ADNOC is now reducing LNG production because Strait of Hormuz is shut, tightening the global gas market again. Bangladesh is seeking about $2 billion in loans to finance imports of LNG and other fuels during the summer. Let's see here. And that's a Goldman Sachs thing on oil. You can see that this is their old forecast for oil, where they thought that oil long-term would maybe hover around 70 once you get into the latter half of 2026. And now they're expecting between the middle part of 2026 all the way out to the end of 2027 for gold to hover around 80. So they just bumped up their expectations quite a bit there on oil from Goldman Sachs. Let's see here. Oh yeah, it's been decided that work will return to normal at workplaces according to applicable regions, and this I believe is Qatar if I'm not mistaken. Cars in waiting, helium chip constraints threaten automotive production already soon. Yeah, there's a lot of helium that currently cannot get to facilities to actually produce stuff, right? And that's a bit of analysis from Steno Larsen. I've spent my Saturday diving into helium, the helium supply chain. Spoiler, AI might survive this wave longer, but automotive and industrial chips, not so much. So autos are getting hit in a lot of scenarios here because you know what? There's actually a lot of tankers that are for moving vehicles, for moving cars and trucks. And a lot of those tankers, a lot of those ships are just stuck. And they can't go anywhere. Or they were meant to drop off cars in the Middle East and they can't. So there's a lot of automotive companies right now that are getting hit explicitly, incredibly hard right now. And if they weren't just getting hit hard on their deliveries, they're also now getting hit hard on the energy side of things too. Because building cars is actually quite an energy intensive activity. You need a lot of energy to run the factories that build cars, and then also all the energy that goes into making the materials for cars. Yeah, the prices for that stuff is going up as well. So then you're going to see this gradual rise in prices of the entire supply chain for cars coming through, and then that'll end up hitting the consumer on the CPI front. Just like what's expected with fertilizers, it's a lot that's adding up here. And so while we were just looking at what RBNZ saying, hey, we really need to be watching inflation expectations, right? So it's NZD, USD. We can pull that chart up here. They were saying, hey, we're looking at medium-term inflation expectations as a really important indicator here. And we're going to change our monetary policy response depending on how that moves. Well, a lot of those inflation expectations are going to be directly driven by these supply chain price increases that are coming down the pike. And we could see prices stay sticky and elevated here for several months. In a prior stream, I mentioned, it'd be nice if things actually turned out to be transitory. It'd be really, really great if things ended up being transitory. But now I am becoming much more sold on the idea that we could see stickier inflation here, potentially all throughout the rest of the year, especially when it's going to take time for Iran to probably come to terms with a new transitory government. And it's also going to take a lot of time to several months is kind of the conservative estimate here. It's going to take a long time to get all the energy commodity operations in the Middle East back to full throttle, to just to normal operations again. For everything to normalize is going to take so long. for a lot of the operations, for a lot of it, it'll come back over several months. And now it's becoming very obvious that that's going to be the time frame set, is several months. It's one thing where if the war only went on for a few weeks and we were able to get regime change, the U.S. was able to execute regime change in Iran, none of this really would have happened because Iran wouldn't have been able to make these attacks. But you know what? When you're dealing with terrorists who are killing their own people, tens of thousands of people, and oh man, it's so terrible, the things that Iran has done that really have justified the U.S. going into Iran. But man, it would have been great if Iran was contained much more strongly, if there was much more help to contain Iran after they committed such an atrocity. And then that would have absolutely helped mitigate, maybe not all of the attacks that would have ended up happening, but I probably would bet that less of the damage that we currently have likely would have occurred. Because if you just have more pressure on them and you have more explicitly, you could say China, India, Europe, more of the Middle East, if they were more proactively involved, especially when the U.S. was building up their forces around February, if they started participating and getting themselves into position when the U.S. was doing that, because that was the time to do that, then I think we would be in a much, much, much better position here and closer to regime change in Iran. But that scenario has not happened, and it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting an easy regime change here, because especially when we go and we look, for example, at the information we just looked at with civil war risks, balkanization risks, and now this thing with Trump saying, hey, we're talking to people in Iran. I feel like we're talking to the real leader, but we're not talking to the Ayatollah here because we've, killed so many of these guys, but we feel like we're talking to the real leader here. And then Trump talked to somebody saying, we're actually talking to several people. It's kind of like a group of people, a group of representatives that are trying to represent a new government. Well, those are the moderates in Iran. And then you have people on Iranian TV coming out and saying, no, we are not talking with the United States, guys. What are you talking about? We are not making any efforts to negotiate with the United States at all. In fact, here's a whole list of demands that we expect the United States to concede to, which includes removing all their military bases from the Middle East, which includes reparations for us to rebuild our own energy infrastructure, to rebuild our own cities. And if you agree to that, then we will unblock the Strait of Hormuz if you do that. And so there's explicitly two sides in Iran that I believe are at risk, and I pointed out at the very beginning of the war, are explicitly likely at risk of fighting each other. And well, now we have to help the moderates in Iran to actually form a new government at this point. Because the conservatives, the religious extremists, they will fight to the death. They will. You want to talk about all these different groups that have been receiving funding from the Iranians for the last several decades who've committed really, really heinous acts of terrorism and violence. Well, who do you think taught them that? Who do you think gave them the money for that? The Iranians are, especially these conservatives that are now explicitly fighting and are not part of these new negotiations with Trump. They are explicitly saying we're going to pretty much fight to the death here. And they're going to keep launching missiles and drones pretty much until they are killed. So until the missiles and drones stop, we're not getting the Strait of Hormuz open. Thankfully, there are these moderates who are trying to come to the table and be the guiding rod here for the rest of Iran and effectively allow the rest of the world to go in and finally get rid of these guys. Whether or not that's going to end up with a ground invasion or not, I don't know. However, the more and more and more that I read, the more and more and more likely I think it is that we're actually going to have a ground invasion into Iran. I don't know if it's explicitly only going to be U.S. citizens, not citizens. If it's going to be the U.S. armed forces explicitly going in. But I wouldn't be surprised if other countries also went in, especially the Saudis, because the Saudis are pissed. See, out of all the countries that have been getting hit by drones and missiles, while every other country got hit really, really hard in the first couple of days, the only country that Iran has ramped up and increased the number of drones and missile strikes on them have been Saudi Arabia. The number of missile strikes and drone attacks on Saudi Arabia have been increasing. So, at least as a fraction, right? So, while they were launching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drones and missiles during the first couple of days, now they're launching maybe 50, 150 attacks. A lot of that is going over to Saudi Arabia. So now the Saudis want to get involved. The U.S. wants to get involved in potentially going in on the ground. And there's now likely a faction, a moderate faction in Iran that wants to help set up the transitory government. And it's likely actually led by that guy that we looked at earlier. What is it? Khalifa? Again, I can actually just bring it up here real quick. I really should try and remember his name because the guy was the speaker of the parliament for Iran. Kalibaf. That's the guy's name. Kalibaf. And you can get a good look at him right over here. So that is the speaker of the parliament in Iran. That's who is speculated to be talking with Trump and who Trump is currently talking about in these videos here of him on the tarmac. And that's Discord, and that's trading. Great. So, man, now you have these forces that really want these Iranian conservatives out. They want those Islamic regime guys out. They want these terrorists out. And the sooner that happens, the sooner the Strait of Hormuz will open. And it's really important that this gets done soon because we're about to go into a huge humanitarian crisis. See, there are all these ships stuck right now in the Persian Gulf. In order to get out of the Persian Gulf, you have to cross the Strait of Hormuz to get to where you need to go. And there's a bunch of ships in the Persian Gulf right now that have thousands of people. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of people of crew are on these ships that are stranded in the Persian Gulf. And they need food, and they need water, and they need medicine. I mean, these people are not supposed to be on these boats for this long. And the longer these guys are on these boats, the sooner rescue missions are going to need to be made for dropping off supplies to these people or letting them dock. But right now, a lot of those operations are underway. And frankly, I think the UN should probably get involved and helping with that because that's going to be a huge humanitarian crisis, frankly. So many people are going to be starved out of their mind. They need fresh water. They need medicine. But a lot of these ports, they won't let these ships dock because it's very, very dangerous. If a ship gets blown up in the port, then they have to remove the ship. They have to disassemble the ship effectively in order to get a new ship in there. So it's just a little too risky to have a ship blow up right there in a port. So they won't let people dock. So there's a lot of people who say, well, fly us in some aid. You know, get a helicopter and bring us some stuff. And there's a lot of people who just won't fly those helicopters. They're not willing to fly those helicopters because they're afraid a drone might come in and hit them. So there needs to be a stronger military presence in the Persian Gulf so that then humanitarian aid can be provided to all these crews that are in the Persian Gulf that need help. And if you expect the United States to do that alone, it's going to be a hard thing to sell. And if you think that the EU should just stand aside out of, because they want to feel vindicated, to feel right, like, oh, Trump, you shouldn't have gone in without like our permission or something. When they had a whole month in February when they were doing the build-up to get involved. I mean, look, that's just my point of view, right? But there's not very many people expressing this. So I feel like it's a valuable change of point of view to get the point of view of someone who doesn't necessarily agree with, okay, it's okay that you condemned all of the tens of thousands of students that were massacred in Iran from all these European leaders. They were doing the condemnations. But then, during the military buildup, where's the backing of their word, right? And now you have another humanitarian crisis on top of all those students getting killed, with all these crew members of all these ships, tens of thousands more people in the Persian Gulf. I mean, these people need help, and a lot of these people are Europeans, and a lot of that cargo also is destined for Europe. Really, Europe should be stepping in and helping at this point. I mean, Europe got involved in Libya for a lot less. They got involved in there for a lot less, right? And that was a NATO operation too. This is way more significant, way more important. However, what I will say is that Trump's communication certainly is not helping. However, that does not excuse the lack of engagement. Just because someone is not communicating the way you would like, it does not excuse you from not following your principles, especially those of, we want to make sure Iran becomes a democracy, right? We don't want to see all these people hurt. If you're going to ignore those things because Trump flip-flops on something, like where do you actually stand here? Are you just going to be a reactionary to Trump, or are you going to actually stand on something that's right, So that's kind of where I stand on those things. And I think Europe should be taking action and getting involved sooner, not later, because it's only going to cause more issues down the road if they don't get involved and they essentially expect the U.S. to take care of all this stuff. Because, don't get me wrong, the U.S. can eventually probably take care of all this stuff, and they'll get some help from the Middle Eastern countries too, right? And maybe a couple of European countries will send some token help. But there needs to be an all-out effort if this is going to get controlled, like, within a week or two. Like, the ships that are reportedly supposed to be getting involved in deploying boots on the ground from the U.S. side of things is only expected to hit Iran in like 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now. By the time we get to that point, it's going to be really desperate for all these people in the Persian Gulf. It's going to be really, really bad. Like, there's going to be a lot of people dying and starving and needing food and supplies. There's probably not going to be enough helicopters to drop off all that supply in order to fly in stuff. We need to start unloading people, but we can't start unloading people unless we can control the risks, contain Iran, stop them from launching stuff. So it's really, really, I think, a bad move for Europe not to get involved at this point. It's really, really important that I frankly think that even India and Pakistan need to be getting more involved. The Saudis are actually really upset with the Pakistanis not getting more seriously involved. They're threatening to actually pull out several $1 billion of investment because the Pakistanis haven't followed through on their defense pact with Saudi Arabia, where Saudi Arabia gets attacked, and the Pakistanis, while it looks like they're getting ready to do something with Iran, the Saudis aren't necessarily too happy about the performance from Pakistan as far as meeting demands from what is their security alliance, their defense alliance. Now, I don't know the specifics on it, so I'm not going to go too much in depth on that and speculate on that. But, man, it's really... again, people need to get involved. And now that we have this opposition, this potential opposition, right, it really does seem like all we really need is to properly contain the religious extremists at this point and help the moderates actually set up the transitory government now. And you know what? A lot of European countries said, we're going to put off joining until there is some kind of transitory government. So, you know what? If these negotiations lead to some kind of transitory government being set up, brokered between the U.S. and the moderates in Iran, then hopefully, then whoever is representing this moderate potential transitory government can then play with the Europeans to actually get involved. And then the Europeans can listen to them, right? And so that's what I hope happens going forward. And then we can get back into the nominal expectations we had back in freaking December with all the 2026 outlooks we had gone through already, expecting the US dollar to be incredibly weak, but now it's an incredibly strong value. I mean, if you look at the stock market here, if you look at the S&P, actually, you know what? We don't even need to look at this. We can actually look at some other equity markets here. So here's the S&P. You can see here's the rise that we had after the attack. Not necessarily the attack, after the announcement from Trump. There were a lot of attacks. And actually, Trump is still going to be attacking Iran. Even though these negotiations happened and Trump said, okay, for 5 more days, we're going to see how these negotiations go. Oh. We need to move that over there. Yeah. And then, can I close this? Yes, let's close that. I don't know what that was. I think I launched a game and it just finished compiling its shaders. It's been like, oh my god, I think it's been like 4 hours that game has been compiling shaders and I just forgot I left it on. But yeah, man. So let's get back over here. So this is when Trump made the announcement, and this was the announcement. Hey, we think that, we're talking to somebody. And then also, if we do CL here, we can copy that. Trump calls for a pause on all military strikes against Iranian power plants. Again, a lot of people, they're just going to read the first half of this. Trump calls for a pause on all military strikes against Iran. They're not going to read the next part that says Iranian power plants. This is not a pause on attacks. This is a 5-day pause on explicitly the power plants and energy infrastructure, just for 5 days, subject to the success of ongoing meetings and discussions. These attacks are still likely, I think, going to happen unless the people that Trump is currently talking to end up becoming the people who represent, at least even initially, the transitory government for Iran. And then we can put this here as well. And we can do this. So this is where the White House made that post. And we can check out a few other things here too. So let's go and check out Japan. Japan also had a nice recovery. The Australian index had a very nice recovery there. The DAX had a very nice recovery. Euro 50 had a nice recovery. The FTSE had a nice recovery. The FTSE 100 had a nice recovery. The Nikkei had a nice recovery. The CAC, the French equity market, also had a nice recovery. New Zealand, it's not open. And Topic also had a nice recovery. So all these equity markets are having very nice bounces right now. In fact, there's also a great number of commodities here that are also down on the announcement. Because if oil prices are falling, it means that the things needed to produce some of these commodities are also going to go down. So if energy prices go up, that means fuel prices go up, and you need fuel to transport a lot of these commodities, especially agricultural products. And when fuel transportation prices go up, guess what ends up happening? Your food prices end up going up as well, because all these people need to pay for transportation to get food to the packer, to get food from the farm, to get food to the grocery store. There's all these transportation paths that have to be taken. There's all these cars and trucks that have to be loaded, unloaded, and driven a long, long way across long distances sometimes to get to their final location. And all those transportation trips, all those cargo trips end up adding up over time. And that ends up in the price of your food. So when oil prices come down, those fuel prices come down, and then your food prices come down. Again, there is a supply chain there that takes time to actually ultimately reach the final end consumer before it shows up in CPI. And some people say that can be a few months. But considering the expectation we said earlier of, okay, given the extent of the current impact, it is reasonable to expect that we have higher CPI for a bit of an extended period of time here. It makes sense. It makes sense that we have a bit stickier CPI maybe going into the third quarter from now till then. It could be 6 months of very, very sticky CPI, where a lot of these costs do end up on the table, do end up in CPI. It's and then you spend most of 2027 getting rid of that, and then you're gonna have extremely cheap fuel, if at least hopefully. And Trump knows this. He needs to get this done by the midterms. So no matter whether or not Europe gets involved or not, Trump is actually going to try and do everything in his power to get victory, to get a transitory government going, and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz before the end, before like a month or two, hopefully, before the midterms, in order to show a win. And guess what? If Trump actually comes out of this successful with regime change in Iran, it's not only going to be regime change in Iran, it's also going to be the end of a very evil, theocratic, authoritarian, terrorist nation state that's been in existence for the last 50 years and is finally removed. That'll be great. And then we'll have unsanctioned Iranian oil. And then oil prices will come down for actually a lot of Asia. Asian oil prices will eventually be coming down once you get to the point of the transitory government. So when you look further out, not just the 6 month stickiness that we're trying to work out how that's going to actually impact what maybe we're trading intermediately here, but when you have a longer term expectation of what a transitory government actually means, you're going to have really low energy prices. So right now, energy prices are insane. We can have very high prices. It could be very uncomfortable globally for a bit here. But I'm generally actually in agreement with Trump on this, that this actually might be worth the cost to get rid of these people. To finally get rid of these people. I mean, you're not going to be, you do actually want to negotiate with the terrorists. We've seen how 30 years of negotiating with the terrorists has worked out for us. 50 years of negotiating with the terrorists. We've seen how that's worked out for us. It's not working out. Okay, it's never worked out. It's a losing strategy. This, however, though, if there's a proper transition, it can work out. And Trump has a very, very, very big incentive to get it done, which is the midterms. Because if it's not done by the midterms, there's going to be a bit of a blue wave here. There's going to be quite a bit of people getting involved on the Democrat side and poking at the grievances of many people who even voted for Trump in 2024, saying, hey, Trump got us into this war for Iran, and look how it's hurt you. Look how gas prices are higher. Look how inflation's going up, man. This is really bad. Vote for us, and we'll go ahead and subsidize some of these things. You know, we'll pass some socialist policies and we'll get you through this. But it really is kind of a poison pill what the Democrats are offering, because it also depends on which Democrat you're talking about and how far left they are on that. I mean, we still haven't seen a rebound in culturally in the United States of more moderate Democrats, because a lot of those people have just jumped ship over to the Republican side. But you know what? There's even though a majority of U.S. citizens voted for Trump, a lot of those people don't like war, and they certainly don't like losing. And Trump doesn't like either of those things either. So hopefully, you know what, for Trump's incentives, he hopefully does well with this, and we can wish him the best, and we can wish the United States the best, and we can hope that they are actually successful in this operation. It says it would bring a lot of good things to the world if it is successful, if the United States does win. All right, it would be great if the United States won and was able to actually topple this regime, and then we don't have astronomically crazy high inflation for a year, right? It'd be great if we only have sticky inflation for 3 to 6 months. That would be great. And then, according to that time frame, you would anticipate that the war is over and you have a transitory government in Iran by like a few months before the midterms. Because then every single Republican is going to be running with ads saying, look at what the president has done. He's ended this war. We have a new government. We're going to have lower inflation once the new government comes in and rebuilds stuff and unlocks all the ports and starts developing new relations with all the other Middle Eastern countries. We're going to have really low inflation and really low energy prices, if that actually is the case in 2027. And the entire short dollar theme that we were expecting here in 2026, back in December of 2025, is very likely to actually materialize in 2027 at that point. I would not be surprised if the dollar really fell through the floor in 2027, if this is actually the case with energy here. And then you know who's going to be extremely happy? Every single European manufacturer is going to be extremely happy, because the euro is going to be so strong. The euro is going to be so, well, the euro is going to be so strong is actually not great for manufacturing exports. So maybe the manufacturers in Europe will not be so happy about such a strong euro. But the US dollar will be a lot cheaper at that point. And then we'll actually have to see what the U.S. credit rating looks like by that point in time, depending on how development of the new tariff policies go by then, because it's also towards the middle to latter half of this year that we're finally expecting to get the results of all the investigations, the mandatory tariff investigations that Trump has had to finally conclude, when the IEEPA tariffs were declared unconstitutional. So all these other tariff-related section laws, a lot of those things are probably going to be implemented in the latter half of this year, and we'll see to what degree they are implemented. Because guess what? April 20th, if we go to the DXY here, April 20th, we're getting a huge refund. All of those tariffs from IEEPA that got overturned, Trump has to pay that back. The Treasury has already made a plan. That stuff gets paid back April 20th. And that's going to actually hit the US. It's going to hit US credit. It's going to hit US credit. So by sometime around April 20th, sometime before it, I really am expecting some kind of more significant news on either the progress on or some kind of announcement of the completion of the tariff investigations since the IEEPA tariffs were overturned and declared unconstitutional. And if we don't get those announcements by April 20th, when all these refunds, these IEEPA tariff refunds start, then I wouldn't be surprised if they're if Moody's or a few credit rating agencies start coming out and saying, hey, maybe the United States credit needs to be wound down, because that was one of the major benefits actually of the tariffs when they were coming through, is that people were like, well, it's not great for the rest of the world, but at least in the United States, it's going to help their credit rating and help manage their debt. Well, it's not just about now from this point on about what policies are able to come through. Are those policies going to be enough to not just replace IEPA, but it's like, to what degree will these new policies, when will they be announced, and how much money will they actually bring in, and to what degree will they help bring down the U.S. deficit? Because those IEPA tariffs, they were helping with managing the deficit, and now they're not there. So now they got to be replaced with something, and we're going to find out either really shortly, or we're going to start to see a bunch of analysts come out and say, oh, maybe we need to issue a warning about potential downgrades to U.S. credit because we're concerned that we're not actually going to be getting the new tariffs that are promised re-implemented. And we'll see exactly how that turns out. All right, you guys. I've now gone on for an hour. I'm very, very happy with how things have gone. I've actually quite surprised with the performance of the stream. We had, at one point, I think it was like 5 people. Yeah, for a long time there. I'm able to keep people's attention for longer on the streams. There's a lot more people starting to watch the streams for longer now. I've been watching the retention. It's like, oh, average watch time is 10 minutes. Average watch time is 12 minutes, 14 minutes. And now it looks like the average watch time for this stream is 20 minutes. So I think I was particularly engaging the stream. Very, very happy with that. Very happy you guys have clicked on and watched and checked out what I have to say. Even if you disagree, right? Even if you disagree with what I have to say, just understand that it's good to understand the other side of your trade too. Even if you think I'm wrong and am likely to lose money with these expectations, so be it. These are my convictions, but it's good to understand why people have a variety of convictions. And who knows, maybe you do agree with my convictions because I bring up some stuff that maybe you haven't heard before, right? There's a lot of talk that frankly is quite anti-US and anti-Trump. And sometimes it's important to listen to, like, okay, well, why does Trump have all this support? It's good to listen sometimes. Like, okay, why does the US have this support? It's good to listen to why people are motivated from the other side. So then you can understand the distribution of expectations. So then when new information comes out, you can understand how I will react. I can understand how people who disagree with me will react to different prices and how their expectations might change, how their interpretation of markets may change. And when you can relate with people on that scale, you're able to way, way easier, in a much more fluid fashion, actually understand where money can start moving and where the incentives may start moving and where the biases may start adjusting weights in the portfolio or taking some positions off or whatnot. Because there's a lot of discretionary trading still. There's still a lot of discretionary trading. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot less of it now. A lot of trading is very, very mechanical now, CTAs and whatnot. But if you can see expectations changing over the horizon and you can understand the distribution of all the different points of views and how those change over time, it becomes a lot easier to rationalize and understand why people have the views and why they're doing the analysis that they're doing. And it's a lot more honest, it's a lot more frank, it's a lot more useful when you're trying to set your own expectations and find out what exactly you want to get exposure to, frankly. Being able to have the best quality information sets you up to set the best autonomous and competent expectations you possibly can. Okay. And man, People really love that little rant at the end there. Yeah. So again, yeah, if you guys want to hang out, I usually hang out in a Discord voice chat here in the Blend Profit Discord. If you want to check out, I mean, we didn't even go over any of the indicators today. I had a stream the other day going over those indicators, right? Actually, we can do a little bit of that right now, just as a little thing here. Because I was going to say, hey, if you're looking at that Discord, you'll probably notice that there are these indicator options here that you can check out and whatnot. And you can see why we went ahead and took these shorts here, right? So here's a peek at the red spot in our distribution of where tops for the week come in. And this is why we put our stop right there, you see, because this is the peak in our distribution, and that is the edge of where the peak, I think, ends, right? And then you have this trough and a bit of a bump right there. So if we were going to see a massive, massive jump up here to the end of the week, I don't want to be short, right? If I'm getting short right here, expecting this to be the top, and price starts moving all the way up here, you know, that's 100 pips higher. I don't want to be in that trade. I want to be out. Where's the reasonable place to stop? Roughly around there, right? Based on the indicator. So that's what I was looking at when setting that trade setup. And you know, I have my trade logs and my trade logs thread in the trading group and whatnot, and the indicators come with the trading group. So if you guys are interested in this and you're interested in more commentary, you can subscribe to the trading group and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And of course, if you guys have watched this long, I'm pretty sure you guys are already liked and subscribed and all that jazz. But I would love to see you guys always in the Discord helping with the trade research. All these forums are so helpful. Especially this one here, followed the Islamic Republic, Operation Epic Fury, where we're constantly following the latest developments for what's going on in Iran. And we set this up back in January when the student protests were going on, and there were all these videos. Oh my God, there's some gory, really terrible videos of just bodies stacked. It's horrible, horrible stuff. I don't even think we posted those in here. I think a couple got posted, and I had to delete them because, you know, we have a kind of a no, you know, if it's not censored, we have a no gore policy implicitly in the Discord, right? We don't want to see snuff. No snuff in the Discord. No snuff in my Discord, okay? No snuff in the Discord. But in off topic, we have cats. Right? And off topic, we have this video about a railway cat, a ceremony for a cat that was the station master in Japan. Look at that little kitty cat. They got that kitty cat dressed up with a cape and a hat. Isn't that so much better than what's going on with talking about with Iran? You know, can't life just be like this? Can't we just dress up cats as train station masters and just enjoy ourselves, right? But no, we have to have religious fundamentalists control 20% of the world's oil and energy tanker flow. Oh, man. Okay, now I'm getting a bit unhinged. So let's go ahead and call it a stream, by don't we? But I'm having fun. I'm having fun. All right, so guys, I'm going to be on Thursday. I'm not going to be here from Thursday this week to Wednesday next week. I'll be doing the weekly trade plan streams on Friday. I'm going to be missing this Friday stream, but if you're in the Plan the Profit Discord here, I will be hanging out in here. I'll still be posting things when I can, and if you're in the trade group, I'll see if I can still post my notes from the research that I'll do, because you know what? I was complaining in another stream, this laptop here was slow as shit. But guess what? I found a way to speed it up. I just told open code, find out where the computer's slow and fix it. And it did it. And I'm so very happy. I haven't had to spend a whole lot of time doing it. And I used a free model for it, and it just fixed it. I'm very, very, very happy about that. Saved me a lot of time there. So now the computer is quite performant. Very, very happy with that. So I'll likely be able to get some work done on it, but do not expect like super extensive work research work for this next week. And especially considering we're now going into the month ahead, there's a bunch of monthly outlooks that are going to be released. Man, there's a lot of stuff to look at when the monthly outlooks come out. So, I'll try and do what I can, but absolutely no promises because I already have made plans and set myself up to be busy. But outside of that, the following week, everything's going to be a normal schedule again. And yeah, man, wow, so many people are starting to watch. So many people are getting in, man. Again, thank you guys very much for watching. It's so nice to see so many more people starting to watch the streams. I'm very, very happy when more people come in and watch the streams and share the streams and like the streams and come in to the research forum and do more research. Always very, very happy to see that. And again, if you want to see the indicators, if you want to try out the indicators, the same place where you join the Discord is the same place where you get the indicators. It's the WAP link in the description. So, okay, doke. Thank you guys very much for watching. I've been your boss, Joe Boss, and I will see you all in a bit.